Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Office Hours FM, episode number 83, where I've got Tom McFarlin in the house today. Hey, Tom, how are you?
Hey, what's up? I'm good. I am McFrickin' good.
Have you ever had anybody call you Tom McFarlin?
No, I've not. That's a first, which is good because the majority of the people will say something about my last name that they think they're being all original and clever, but I've heard it since third grade. So it's not original nor clever, and it shows their lack of originality and cleverness in their adulthood.
Well, I'm glad that apparently I've struck on something original, even if it might be annoying. I promise to never say it again.
No, not annoying. I mean, I put up with all kind of whatever stuff on Twitter, so this is fun.
Sweet. Well, we will get to some questions with Tom here in a second. For those of you listening live, so very glad to hear you, or excuse me, to have you. You can ask questions of Tom either on Twitter with the hashtag OfficeFM, or if you're watching via the Google Q&A app, you can, watching via the Google app, you can just use Q&A. I got that all jumbled, but you're smart people, so I know that you can figure that out. Anyways, yeah, so we can roll on in. So, Tom, we were doing a little bit of pre-chat before the show, and of course, I figure most of the people that are tuning in because they love Tom McFarlin and they already know who you are. But for the uninitiated, will you kindly tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do?
Yes. So clearly, my name's Tom McFarlin. You can call me Tom or call me whatever else, because that seems to be what all of my other friends online do, even here in this broadcast. My primary job is to DDoS Matt Medeiros' website at any chance I get, as well as trolling him on Twitter. And when I'm not doing that, I run a small WordPress shop called Pressware. And we do custom WordPress solutions for other people. Now, that might vary between doing custom theme builds, custom plugins, or even building web applications on top of WordPress. And it wasn't until recently that people started to ask me, what does the name Pressware mean? And it's a combination of WordPress and software, because I believe that WordPress can be used to build software. I've written about this a number of different times. And for those of you who have been keeping up with WordPress, you know that it is a super exciting time between the activity that's happening around WP CLI as well as the REST API. So this is only going to continue to be a stronger movement. And that's the direction that I've been building my career, and I want to continue to do so. And so that is what we do.
Awesome. I think the first time I encountered you was actually on Matt's podcast, the Matt Report. And it was an interview from back in your 8-bit days.
Yes.
We were really going for the archives. I don't know, that was maybe 3 years ago.
Yeah, that's been a while.
Let's see. We've got already getting some fantastic questions. Gary Jones wants to know, who is your favorite troll?
Oh, wow. I would tell Gary that he would be, because of the amount of comments that he will leave in a code review on GitHub, except he's not trolling. The dude is providing arguably some of the best coding advice that you can get in WordPress. So this is like a PSA. If you have a public repository on GitHub and Gary leaves comments, he's not trolling. He is teaching, and you need to learn. But in terms of who is my favorite troll, and by favorite, that means the person who makes me laugh the most and the person who normally has the best, what is it the old people call it? The best zingers. That's tough, because I've got guys like Travis Northcutt and Andrew Norcross and Daniel Espinoza, Matt Medeiros. I don't know. I mean, every time I look at my mentions on Twitter, somebody is saying something to me. So I don't know. Everybody's awesome. I don't think that I have a bad troll, and if I do, they just get blocked.
There are some good ones, and they're all quick with the zingers. I think maybe we need a hashtag troll press or something.
Yeah, maybe I should fork WordPress and do troll press and just let everyone hit me, because I mean, why not? Twitter's fast, but could we be faster?
There you go. And while we're talking about goofy things, you have a really fantastic Giphy site.
Oh yes, dev practices. I don't know if I can't tell if there's anyone in the group chat, but I'll go ahead and put up a link. It's devpractic.es. So what that is basically, it is subtitled A Day in the Life of the Developer. And basically it is a one post a day Tumblr that uses an animated GIF and a title describing what's happening in that GIF that basically explains what it's like to do what we do. I should provide a disclaimer for those of you whose sense of humor is different than mine, that it's just in fun. I mean, no offense by it. And I do welcome submissions, and you can see that in the top of the page. So submit some dev practices. Plenty of people do. Although the queue is kind of big, so I don't know when you'll see yours.
Well, yeah, I submitted one once upon a time. I don't remember if it ever went up or not, but I do enjoy going over there for giggles. All right. Well, now that we've got the fun stuff out of the way, we're going to talk about nothing but dull and boring things for the rest of this hour. So I hope you're excited about that.
Serious, Tom.
All right. Here we go.
Let's go.
So first question. And just let's set the stage, because I'm taking you're a humble guy. You didn't do a whole lot of bragging on yourself. So I'll just go ahead and add some brag for context. But you have contributed a ton to the WordPress community and have a particular, what do the old people say? You're fond of the coding standards.
Yes.
So you've done a lot to help educate and lift up the community in that regard. And one of the things you've put out there, and this is Jackie's question, but what led to the creation of the plugin boilerplate plugin?
Yeah. So, okay, that's a good question. And thank you for the compliments. So what led to so let me back up. My background is in computer science, and I had a focus I focused in software engineering when I was in college. And when I got out, I was primarily doing .NET work. And by .NET, I don't mean the domain, I mean Microsoft's framework. And during that time, I was exposed to a lot of different things from I remember when Microsoft was rolling out ASP.NET MVC. I got a chance to meet some really influential people, like Uncle Bob Martin. If you haven't looked up Bob Martin, I highly recommend it. Read a couple of his books. Similarly, I recommend Martin Fowler. Eric Evans has done domain-driven design. So I got a lot of experience in object-oriented analysis and design. And then when I was doing contract work after hours or on the weekends, when it's just you and your wife and there's and you don't have any kids yet, you have that kind of time. So I was doing a lot of Ruby on Rails and a little bit of WordPress. And then when I decided to go self-employed, I was going to divide my time, Rails and WordPress. And I found that I really did have a passion for WordPress for a variety of reasons, which we can go into later if anyone's interested. But what I noticed is that when building things for WordPress, there wasn't really a consistent way of doing that. And I think, though I would like to see there be a consistent way of doing certain things, I realized that by nature of open source use, there probably never will be. So a lot of the work that I was doing when I first started was writing custom plugins for people. And I wanted a good object-oriented base off of which to start. And that is what kind of seeded the plugin boilerplate. And I don't know how I don't really know how it began to garner attention, but as it did, I began to try to make it more mature and continue to iteratively develop it, provide a little bit more documentation, et cetera, to a point where it got to a place where people were asking more questions about what is the purpose of this class? Why is it structured this way versus how do I use this in a project? So there began to introduce this learning curve, which meant there was a level of complexity that I don't want to say I never intended it, but it required some background in object orientation. And So that also kind of played hand in hand with my blog and some of the other things I was writing for, such as Tuts Plus, which is mainly to just help educate other people on the way that I approach problem solving, because that's what computer science is. Excuse me. And the thing is that I'm not trying to sit there and say that it's my way is the right way. I'm trying to say that here's the way that I've approached it, but I'd love to hear your feedback, tweaks, comments, alternatives, whatever. And anyway, as the plugin boilerplate began to get a little more rock solid and a little more kind of it settled down a little bit, the amount of contract work I was taking on was exceeding the amount of time that I had available to work on the boilerplate. So since then, Devin Vinson is now in charge of it, and I couldn't be happier with the direction he's taken it. It's still a very active community. It's still under development, and so this also has freed me up to focus on the next big thing. Sometimes that's projects for Pressware. Sometimes that may be something I want to do with my blog. And then sometimes that may be some things that I'm planning to hopefully do next year. I've got a notebook full of ideas. I just, time.
Yeah, it's hard to choose which one of those to actually invest in when you've got a lot of exciting ideas in your head. Mm-hmm. Well, that actually rolls quite perfectly into a question that Gary asked. He asked about the next 24 months at Pressware, specifically what you have for the future. And before the show, we were talking about, whether you might possibly take that in an agency direction or continue as it is, or what are your thoughts there?
So when I started Pressware, so to give a little bit of background, I have had an LLC since I was in college, and that was because I was doing small contract projects. And when I say small, I mean few hours during each week, because I do enjoy solving problems for people. And I do want to continue to get better at it. I'm one of those people who, some people see their job as a 9-to-5, clock in, clock out, get a paycheck. And I feel extremely fortunate that I was able to take a hobby and convert it into a career. And so I get to spend the majority of my time when I'm not responding to emails, doing things that I love. And there's always something to learn, and I'm meeting a lot of smart people. And so when I started the LLC, it went under a different name. And the name was kind of, I'm not even going to mention it because it would be ripe for trolling. So it doesn't even matter. But it's the same LLC. If you look in the state's database, same tax code, whatever. Anyway, when I named it Pressware, it was because building software for WordPress or solutions for WordPress. And I have been very, very slowly and deliberately trying to take this in a direction that I believe is what I want out of my career, at least for the next, say, 10 years. Now, I come from a family where my dad started his business when he was 40. My mom works with him, and my brother will probably actually take over that business. It's not a software company. It's a commercial storefront company. I'm the nerd in the family. So, and that company's 40 employees. I don't have an aspiration to build or 40-ish employees. I don't have aspirations to build a company like that. What I want to do is to basically create a small, what the industry calls an agency, of a handful of people who are doing very good WordPress work, who understand high quality, end-to-end building solutions with WordPress. And I want to be able to do various projects versus a single product, because at the risk of I hope this doesn't make me sound immature, but I get bored if I'm just working on one thing, whereas new projects introduce new challenges, sometimes new problems, sometimes variations of an old problem. So over the next 24 months, what I hope to do is to solidify the project backlog that I have for Pressware, the relationship that I have with Andy Adams, who is contracted to work with me right now, and for he and I to continue to grow Pressware into a name that's more established. So when someone says, hey, I really need some custom WordPress work done, who can I contact? I want Pressware to be mentioned or thought of in that name. And there are some other fantastic companies that are out there that are at that level, and I respect them. And hopefully one day that's where I'll be.
What would be the type of work that you would want Pressware to be known for? I mean, any specific, like, we crush it with e-commerce or membership, or any particular niche in there?
That I love that question. I was actually just asked that earlier I had a conversation with someone that was from Friday and then continued on into Monday. E-commerce sites are great, but the way that I normally implement them is through using the expertise that other people have built, like, of course, easy digital downloads. Membership sites, there's a number of different plugins. I actually do have an idea for something I want to do on my own site with a membership site. But in terms of what we want to be known for, it's for creating, so it is for creating solutions that fit the bill for what the user needs. Now that's really general, I know, because you say, well, what if the user needs e-commerce? Can you do that? Well, yes, we can, but we're very interested in coming alongside you, understanding your business problem, understanding the domain, and making sure that we're not just getting something working for you, but that we are providing a well-engineered, well-architected solution that fits your business like a glove. I don't want to ever turn over a project to someone and hear them say, well, it works, but if I could go back, I would change this, that, or the other. What I'd rather them say is, man, this is the solution that I didn't even know we needed it like this. And that there's a lot wrapped up in that, especially in feedback loops and project management. But I want to be able to create the type of solutions for people that it's like when you download an app on your computer or your phone, you're like, man, this solves that problem, and it solves it perfectly. And I use the word perfectly loosely a little bit, but that is what I want to be known for, is creating handmade, very tightly coupled solutions to a business need.
Cool. Well, I look forward to seeing the next iteration. And Andy, I had him on the show. I don't remember which episode number it is, but just fantastic, smart guy.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, as a little aside for you guys that are listening, I finally put up and it's very simple, but if you go to officehours.com/guests, you can see just an archive of all the guests that have been on there, and more easily connect you to episodes with particular people. So man, Gary and Jackie were ready with questions today. So we've got some good stuff on deck. Now, speaking of people I've had on the show, I had Hello Tanya on a while back, and we talked quite a bit about the WordPress Developers Club, which, for people that missed that episode, she's basically forming an educational model that's geared toward creating better developers that are following coding standards, and maybe bringing some sort of a certification into the mix. And the rumor on the streets that I hang out in is that you are involved with the WP Developers Club.
Yes, and I am. And to back up a little bit, the way that I have kind of pitched, or the elevator pitch for the WP Developers Club, is that it's kind of a academy for those that want to get formal, intense, I hesitate to use that word, on how to become high quality WordPress developers. And Tanya is at the helm of it. She's an incredibly bright person. And I play a very small role in it. I'm on what is known as the advisory board. So I help, well, when she comes up with the documentation for courses or for lessons or for things like that, I, along with a number of different people, are responsible for reading that, tweaking that, adjusting that, making suggestions, things like that, or just saying, hey, this is good to go. And the reason is because I'm I am very big on education, which is why I do spend a portion of my time working with Envato at Tuts Plus, is because of the amount of education that they are pouring out into the internet. And I know that this has potential to devolve, not between us, but with other people, devolve into a conversation about theme force and WordPress and the usual stuff that you're used to hearing. I'm not interested in that conversation. But when I have the opportunity to help educate other people or empower other people to educate other people, I try to volunteer or to work in that capacity, because there's never been a time like this in history. So anyway, WordPress Developers Club is something I highly recommend checking out. Go to the website. I've blogged about it as well. It's kind of a summary, and then you can get the deep, all-encompassing information from the website. And there's also a Slack channel that has there's a Slack group with a number of different channels for depending on what it is that you want to do. Tanya does a fantastic job of putting together live broadcast and other material. And there's some other high-profile people. Excuse me. There's some other high-profile people like Gary and like Mario Peshev. I hope that I did not mispronounce that last name. And Carrie, I believe you're actually in there as well. And so there are a lot of very passionate people involved kind of behind the scenes in order to help others get better at this dream that they're pursuing, or whatever it is they're aspiring to be.
Cool. Well, you get 1 million internet points for helping teach others.
Yes. Where do I cash those? Like, is that
right? They're kind of like Bitcoins, but Bitcoins that don't work.
Oh, okay. So they're kind of like Bitcoins, but kind of how they are now.
Yeah. I mean, if you give me your mailing address, I'll send you some bubble gum.
Okay.
Possibly okay. 2 pieces. One little nugget I did want to extract from there, because I know a lot of my audience are freelancers. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to freelancing, I mean, we get in our own head. Most of the time we're working by ourselves as opposed to a co-work environment and whatnot. And like you said, you've got this little notebook full of ideas. I mean, that's all of us kind of jotting down as the ideas come. Mm-hmm. But one thing I really love that Tanya did is create that advisory board. Mm-hmm. And not that it would even have to be so official as what Tanya's done, but I guess an encouragement to the people that are listening to the show: bounce your ideas off of other humans.
Yes.
Even if it's an informal process, there's so much value. And I mean, I've had things that I thought were a really fantastic idea, and somebody else, my family, actually, I come from a family of people that like to invent businesses. And so we'll email back and forth, hey, what about this? And, I'll email back like, dude, somebody launched that service 3 years ago. You're late to the party. But yeah, it's a lot of value there.
I would push back against that, because, and here's why. When I say, hey, I've got this idea for something, what do you think? And there's a handful of people who I'll talk to, and I don't mind sharing who they are in a little bit, but if it's relevant. But every now and then you get that person who says, well, this already exists in X, Y, and Z format. And I think, well, how many times have you gone to the grocery store and seen how many brands of ketchup? So, like, unless you're creating the exact same thing, there's room for differentiation. And I can't speak for other countries, but in the United States, we have the ability to create similar, though different, products and compete. And, idealistically, the winner wins, but not always.
Well, yeah, you're right. There can certainly be competition in this space, but when somebody has already got 90% market share, you've got to look at what you're going to do to really.
Oh, yeah. If they've got 90%, I would probably, I don't know. That might be an unwise decision to pursue, trying to take that down. You're not going to make the next iPhone. Samsung.
Man. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah. they tried. So getting back to some technical questions or developer-oriented questions, Jackie asked, for those of us who come from a procedural background, which that's my background, and there's a struggle of adapting to an object-oriented approach. Do you have any advice, or like how do you best jump into learning that approach?
Yes. I will tell you that I don't think it's necessarily a good idea at this point as a beginner to jump into WordPress core. I doubt that's what was on your radar, but there are some object-oriented places in WordPress, but for a number of reasons that aren't worth going into right now. Classes in PHP, especially in WordPress, are treated as glorified namespaces. Now, namespaces is a object-oriented word, and it represents basically a logical grouping of classes. In terms of ways to get familiarized with object-oriented programming, if you'll bear with me for just a minute, I want to see if there is a book that's available or still available, because it's one of the best series. Some people may laugh, oh, this book looks like it's a bunch of humor or whatever. I cannot recommend it enough, but there is even this whole series, but there is a book on Amazon. And if you Google head first, 2 words, object-oriented analysis and design, it's geared towards beginners, super easy to read, a chapter a night or work through the examples. And these aren't boring examples. You're not going to be writing these examples that are going to put you to sleep and make you wonder why I ever did this. No. You're going to understand what classes are. You're going to understand what properties or attributes, depending on where you're coming from, are. You're going to understand phrases like constructors and public, private, and protected methods. You're going to understand things like polymorphism, which sounds like a word that a scientist would use in a biology lab, but it's not a hard concept to understand. And that's something that programmers, gosh, we do it so much. We use these words that sound so big for the most, what I think are extremely simple concepts. And I'm not saying that as someone who's done object-oriented programming for that long. I'm saying that because of things like inversion of control or dependency injection. Like, these sound like such medical terms. In reality, it's just the way that you're passing data around. That's what it comes down to. But the reason that I like object-oriented programming is because it fits my conceptual model of how software should be built. So when a program begins running, be it a WordPress plugin, or be it something that maybe it's a executable binary that I have running on my machine, in my head, I have this conceptual model of, and I realize I now sound crazy talking about things spinning around in my head. I have a conceptual model of all the pieces that are moving and how they're talking to each other. But it also helps to make things a bit more manageable, a bit easier to follow. And I think that it helps to organize your code a little bit better. There are arguments against everything I've said. I acknowledge that. I'm not trying to preach object-oriented programming, but I'm a fan of it. I use that. And I think that if you're very interested in learning just the basics of it, look up Head First Object-Oriented Programming. Head First Object-Oriented Analysis and Design. Because what that'll do is that'll help you take a problem, analyze it, and then design what the classes will look like. And like Forrest Gump, that's all I've got to say about that.
If one of the folks that's listening live wants to tweet out a link to that book, that would be fantastic. I'll retweet it. I'm not fast enough to look it up and tweet it all at the same time because I want to take in all the Tom is sharing. So shifting gears a little bit, did you happen to hear the Chris Coyier and Alyssa Part put on a state of front-end state of front-end development session yesterday?
Sadly, no, I did not. It's, like in the morning when you sit down and you see your Feedly or whatever feed burner or whatever feed reader you use, and you're like, oh my gosh, how did this happen between midnight and 7 a.m.? And I saw that it was coming, wanted to participate, or not wanted to participate, wanted to tune in. And I did not get to do so. So,
well, you know what? There's no public flogging that's going to happen here. And at the
you
risk
say that, but I'm going to sign off this, and people are going to give me. There's going to be a new website about it up in 40 minutes about.
Well, they're going
flogging Tom.
They're going to throw eggs at me too for what I'm about to say, and that is that there really wasn't anything earth-shattering in that session. The thing that I did take away, and I actually do have a question for you that's following up on this, but they started it off by naming a bajillion things under the sun. Like, does this fall under the umbrella of front-end development? They're like, HTML, of course. CSS, of course. And on down the list they would go until it got a little bit more hairy. Like, okay, well, JavaScript, and how about all these like JavaScript frameworks and these things, and basically accessibility, that falls under that. So they came up with this mile-long list of things that could apply to a front-end developer. And my takeaway was there is no one definition for a front-end dev. It can look like a lot of different roles.
Yeah.
And my question to you that is coming out of that, find it back here in the Twitter stream, but and it really lost its impact when I had to stop to search Twitter. Okay. So Jackie asked, what makes a WordPress developer stellar in your opinion? So it could be this, back end, front end, regardless of which technologies you're feeling proficient in, but what makes them really stellar?
Okay. I'm glad she qualified it by my opinion. So let's kick back for
I didn't know if
90 minutes and chat and wax philosophical about.
Let's do it.
I'm kidding. So what do I consider a stellar WordPress? Is it just a stellar WordPress developer or a stellar front-end WordPress developer?
I framed it with front end, but it could be any sort of developer.
Okay, I will try to start broad and then narrow in on front end. And I'll probably talk about some back end stuff because that is, if I take that quote out of context, it's going to sound very bad. So server side, I'll probably take in some server side stuff because that's what I like. Or that's what I have a strong interest in. Anyway, so stellar WordPress developer. They have a strong understanding of the WordPress coding standards. This includes the PHP coding standards. This includes the JavaScript coding standards. This includes even a tangential understanding of the PHP standards that are out there. These are available on GitHub. If you just Google GitHub and PSR, you'll fall down the rabbit hole of all things for the PHP standards. Now, the WordPress standards are a little bit different. You're building things for WordPress, therefore you should be following the WordPress coding standards. So there needs to be an understanding of that. The next thing is that there needs to be a understanding, or actually I take that back. There needs to be a passion to learn or to constantly learn, because WordPress moves fast. People talk about technology moving fast. We all know that. But the speed at which WordPress moves is something that should not be ignored. I recommend reading sites like Post Status. I recommend, if you have the financial ability, to become a member so that you can get these emails daily-ish that Brian puts out. I recommend reading WP Tavern. They will keep you abreast of the things that are happening in WordPress and in the WordPress economy. So you need to know what's going on with the tool set that you're using. Getting a little bit deeper, I would say that you need to be able to distinguish between what would go in a theme, which should generally be presentation, and what would go in a plugin, which will generally be functionality. There is some overlap sometimes. It's probably not the best podcast for that. As far as front end is concerned, you're going to be talking about JavaScript, CSS, markup, HTML, HTML5, CSS, CSS3, and then the CSS preprocessor that has won over is Sass. SASS. You can find that on the web. I believe it's sas-lang.org. It's like a superset of CSS. Makes it easier to write CSS if you're already an expert. If not, don't sweat it. You can learn it, but learn CSS first. Then there's going to be, and for JavaScript, the JavaScript library that you will most likely need to be familiar with is jQuery. There are some other ones that are used in WordPress. I would not recommend trying to jump in and understand that until you have a very deep understanding of JavaScript as a whole. The two books that I recommend for learning JavaScript are Head First JavaScript, and then once you've completed that book, reading The Good Part, or JavaScript, The Good Parts by Douglas Crockford. Super skinny book, incredibly dense material. Not dense and boring, but dense, and you will walk away with a very deep understanding of JavaScript. As far as HTML and HTML5, that to me has been something that I found to be pretty easy to pick up. But if not, there are plenty of great materials on the web for that. And I'm sure you can find recommendations for that. I think it's important to study other people's code. I know underscores is a pretty big, there's a pretty popular theme on the web, on GitHub right now. It's kind of a starter theme. I am probably going to get a little flack for this. I'm not a huge fan of starter themes, but if you're someone who's just getting your feet wet, then taking a look at underscores will not hurt you. The reason I'm not a fan of them is because when I sit down to start building something for someone else, a single starter theme, I end up yanking things out, and that is creating more work for me than if I start from a clean slate. Now, as far as the server side goes, you will need an understanding of PHP. Now, you can learn that by poking around at other people's code and then trying things and, or Googling, and you'll come across Stack Overflow or a similar site. Please, if you copy and paste code, which I really do not think you need to be doing, but if you do that, take time to understand what the code is doing. Do not just paste it in and say, oh, it works, I built this. Because no, what you did is you took something else that someone else wrote, dropped it in your project, and now you have functionality. When you begin to understand how things in PHP work and how functions work, you are going to begin thinking in terms of PHP. And so when you're faced with this problem again in the future, and you will, because problems consistently arise, you will know, oh, this is a perfect place in which I should be using something like, the string comparison function, or this should be somewhere I need to be using the array unique function, things like that. Then you have the WordPress API. It's kind of then there's multiple WordPress APIs, but I'm kind of using that as an umbrella term. There are a number of those, all of which I think that you should understand. These include things such as the settings API, the options API, the theme modification API, the metadata API. This includes the new term meta API. It sounds more intense than it really is. If you're new, I do understand the learning curve that is presented with this. But if you're used to post meta, user meta, comment meta, and post meta, term meta is not going to be any different for you. And then understanding the relationship between when you're writing code, like I'm going to add some metadata to this user, understanding how that's connecting to the database. And when you see how the data flows from the database up through WordPress, up through the code that you've written, up to the templates that you have written, styled with your CSS and tweaked with your tweak the behavior of it with your JavaScript, you have got the full picture. I think I probably just unloaded a lot of information really quickly. I didn't mean to, if I inundated you with information, I didn't mean to do that. Luckily, this is recorded. Hopefully there can be some bullet notes or something like that. If you want to have me back.
We're going to go back and I'm going to rewind this 30 times to get all the books that you've said. Joe wants to know if you have an Amazon referral code for all those.
I appreciate it, Joe. I don't just buy the books and pay the and pay the authors for their good work. I'm not so interested. I appreciate it, but I mean, not a couple pennies here and there, no big deal.
I think he was trolling more than he was wanting to give you his pennies. But
Joe, never tweet again.
Joe, I don't know. Joe's a pretty straightforward, serious guy. He probably wouldn't troll. We've got Jesse trolling. I'm actually shocked at the lack of trolling by Matt. He might have had to run off for an emergency phone call or something.
I know people who may have done something to people that I know like Matt so that he is not around.
Interesting. Wow.
So watch your back, everybody.
So if we read on WP Tavern tomorrow that there was a kidnapping in the WordPress space, and Matt was hauled off in a blindfold for an undisclosed location for a random hour, it didn't have anything to do with this show.
Matt is the only person in WordPress that could technically be kidnapped. And either, I mean, he might be napping. I don't think the guy does much. So, you know, I mean, it could be any of those.
Oh, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. Okay, so you brought up a little point about the difference between themes and plugins and what belongs in which, and you said that wasn't maybe a good conversation for this venue, and I'm telling you, it is a good conversation. We've talked about this on the show before. I've blogged about it, and you know, when I first started working with WordPress, I learned to just toss everything into functions.php. And as I've matured in my code, I now understand the importance of splitting out some of that functionality. But can you elaborate on that?
Oh, I can, because I think that that's something that everyone starts out doing. Oh, functions.php. This is the place in which I can put all of my own custom functionality. I would say if there's an analogy in object-oriented land, we would call this a God class. And a God class is an anti-pattern. And when we use the prefix anti, we're normally saying, I am against this. So themes, WordPress themes. What comes to mind when you hear the phrase WordPress themes? And normally it's, I want a theme that makes my site look good. No one says, I want a theme that's going to make my site do something cool. I don't, I need that SEO theme. I need that caching theme. That doesn't make any sense. You want to put makeup, or you want to put a nice suit and tie on. You want to present your best to the internet, to the audience of the internet as you walk into that amazing party that it is, where there's people in the corner that have been drinking way too much. And so a theme, in my opinion, is primarily the way your site looks. That means it should be primarily composed of markup, template tags, which is WordPress vocabulary for ways to talk to WordPress that allows you to, render things like your title, your post title, your page title, your categories, your comments, things like that. And it also incorporates your CSS and your JavaScript as necessary. Here's the thing. There are a type of WordPress themes that are beginning to emerge that we're hearing referred to as app themes or application themes. I'm going to defer to that. If you want to rope me back into that, that's fine. But that, I think, is kind of not the direction I want to take this conversation, because I think it might be confusing. So think of themes as presentation. Now, plugins, this is fun. Think of plugins as apps for WordPress. And I guess we can think, Apple was really probably the first to popularize the word app, short for application, short for we're going to, when you think about the word application, it's easy to think about it in terms of computing, but think about it in terms of a broader context. When you're in math class in high school, or when you're in math class in college, and they say, well, what is the application of doing the integral of this function? Well, it's to find the area under a curve. Okay, that is the application of this mathematic. What's the application of this physics? So it's just a way, what is the solution to doing this? And that's what apps are. And that's what plugins do. They are a way, okay, I need a way to optimize the search engine optimization of my posts. I need a plugin for that. Or I need an app for WordPress for that, whatever. So you go and you get whatever the most popular one is, which right now is I guess it's called Yoast SEO. I think they changed the name from WordPress SEO. Or maybe you need something that allows you to stick categories at the top of a category archive page. So you go and you get your category sticky post plugin. And so plugins are, sometimes they're small, sometimes they're extremely large. This is normally where a debate about Jetpack will ensue. I'm not getting into that. Sometimes you want to do something that allows you to write comments back via email. That's where Postmatic comes in. It's a plugin that you install that allows you to manage your comments from the inbox, or from your email inbox rather than from the dashboard of WordPress. So plugins are more functionality. This doesn't mean that they can't have presentational aspects. So for example, let's say that you want to display a counter on your website and a person needs to set a time of, hey, in 1 hour and 15 minutes, something needs to happen on the front end. So maybe they want to show the counter on the front end. You'll need to write a little bit of front end code to be displayed, but a plugin is not a theme, and it shouldn't be. So so there is a little bit of blurring in the lines in that in plugins, I'm not saying you'll never write front end code. And in themes, I'm not saying you'll never write back end code, but for all intents and purposes, there is a separation of concerns between those two.
Excellent. And I like how many things there are that you're not going to get into. You are the ultimate avoider of even coming in the neighborhood of WP drama. Fantastic. Gary has a really great question. And I have to admit, I was thinking about myself, but he wants to know, how long did it take you to find a t-shirt that was the exact same shade as the wall that you're sitting next to?
You know, Gary, I need to alter your question a little bit. So my family and I just moved into a new house.
Well,
so
let me stop you real fast. I don't believe that there was a filter around Gary's question for you to change the output.
Well, Jerry, I'm sorry. I apologize. Gary has changed my code enough to where I feel like this is my chance to change his question. So okay. It's open source. I'm putting in a filter and I'm going to be changing it. The question is not how long did it take for me to camouflage myself against a wall. The question is, how long did it take me to find a house that matched my shirt? And the truth is that I am set up in a bonus room above the garage with a makeshift office. I have my computer and microphone and coffee mug set up on a table against a slanted wall. And the wall's white. The roof is white. The wall is this blue. My shirt is gray. I don't know if you are colorblind, but that is 3 colors. So I don't completely blend in. But to answer your question, this morning I got up and I noticed on my calendar I was coming on office hours, and I said, how can I coordinate with my environment? Because if Gary Jones is going to be present in that chat, I need to make sure that I am presenting myself in a way that will not only be appealing, but that will invoke curiosity.
Well done, sir. And really what it does is just highlight your face, because we can't see the rest of you camouflaged into the wall. So it's excellent. And I'm glad that you found a house to match your shirt.
Yes. I mean, it beats, I could be sitting outside, but it's raining. I don't think I'd be on the podcast long if I was outside.
No, it's not good for the computer. Okay, so are you familiar with the Genesis framework at all, or have you used it?
Well, in terms of I have actually. I'm working on a project right now that uses it. In terms of being familiar with it as have you ever heard of it? Absolutely. Have I done a lot of work with it? No, but I know that, I've seen the diagrams of, I know how many hooks it provides. I've seen the diagrams of how you can hook into it and where you would make your changes and things like that. I don't have any bad things to say about Genesis.
All right.
They paid me $700 to say that. I think I'm offline.
Are you kidding? $700? They only paid me $600.
No, $700, man. It's because I blend into my wall.
There you go. Man, I chose my outfit wrong today. Yeah, so they recently put in their latest release included a lot of accessibility enhancement, things like skip links and better drop-down menus. And what are your thoughts on accessibility in WordPress, its current state, and what's being done to push it forward?
Based on the way that you've asked the question, I would say that I'm a huge fan. I mean, we need to make the web more accessible. When you're powering a quarter of the web, you need to make sure that, or 23% if we need to be precise. You need to be able to make sure that the things that that you have put in place are going to be as readable, or I can't believe I'm about to say this word, as accessible by as many people as possible. But here's the thing: WordPress can't do it alone. Your work has to play a role in it, which means you have to get educated in it. I am not an expert on accessibility. I tend to be a pragmatist in that if a job that I am working on requires knowledge of this, then I will go learn it. And sometimes I'll even go consult with someone who is an expert. And there are people in WordPress who are experts in accessibility. Tweet out about it. You will find someone very quickly. Now, I will say this, and I don't think that every single theme or every single project needs to be accessible. And here's why. Because I don't want to be carried to the stake and burned alive. When you're building a custom solution for a client, and they are a small team, or they're an individual or someone like that, and they don't have accessibility needs, that is something that is not needed. Similarly, if you are building something for someone who is a native English speaker, you don't need to internationalize your code for the sake of translation if it's never going to be translated. So you have to know your client or you have to know your audience. So accessibility, good. Don't do it for the sake of doing it. Do it for good reasons. Same with internationalization. Don't do it just because. Know what it is that you're building, for whom you're building, and then be practical about it. But also don't dismiss accessibility. Like, do what you can to educate yourself.
So I hear what you're saying, but let me argue with you just a little bit.
Please do.
Take internationalization.
Yes.
Like, if you go to write a string, do you go ahead and wrap it in a translation function because you're just used to doing that?
I have. It's a trap. The truth is that it is almost a habit for me, because so much of the work that I had done prior to these custom solutions for people were in themes that were sold on pretty wide markets. And so that was just part of what I did. So when a project starts out, what I will do is ask the client, or whoever it is I'm talking to, does this need to be will this ever be translated? And if not, then I won't use double underscore or underscore E or any of that. But I will say that it feels funny not to use it. But using it for the sake of using it is not a good reason. That I don't think that using it for the sake of just using it, when it will serve no purpose in the long term, is not a good reason for using it. I know people will argue with me. I'm completely fine with that.
Okay, because I was going to keep on arguing, but
argue.
I'm not going to get I'm not going to get into that. We're going to do a separate podcast where we just get into everything.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll just have a throwdown. We'll bring all the trolls and popcorn.
We will bring that. I will not match my wall. I will put paint on under my eyes, and I will work out.
On the show?
No, gosh, no. What kind of show are you trying to run?
I don't know. You just said I'm going to work out, so I
gotta get big if we're gonna be fighting.
Gotta get ready, prep up, do some yoga. Which this is total non sequitur, but on the WordCamp US schedule, it's got on the first day of WordCamp from 8 to 9 is registration and yoga.
Are you kidding? Or are you being for real?
No, I'm being completely serious. Now I know that Matt Mullenweg is a yoga fan. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's where that comes from, but there were two things that I didn't expect to see. I didn't expect, maybe registration and coffee or registration and mix and mingle. But it's going to be registration and yoga, apparently. So who knows?
Well, I will say, this will probably come back to bite me. I try to do yoga about once a week. It's not my primary form. I think we've talked about, or we were talking about this before the show. I'm a runner. Like, that's my go-to thing. But I do think yoga has its benefits. I do think that it helps, the usual stretching, and it actually does have benefits for your muscles and all that. But I think that it's going to be a very weird, I don't know how weird it's going to be, but it's going to be something else. It's going to be an interesting thing to register and then hop into yoga class at WordCamp US.
I think I'm just going to be the troll that periscopes it.
I'm sorry, could you please repeat that? I didn't hear the troll that what?
That periscopes the whole thing.
Oh, yeah. Periscope it from the front, because otherwise if it's from the back and people are doing weird moves like downward dog, it's not going to be good.
I mean, somebody with the standards committee will be on me in a hurry. We've only got a few minutes left here together, and you've already named off a ton of resources. But if you wouldn't mind sharing, like, what are some of your go-to podcasts, and how do you find out about these excellent books? Like, what are your sources?
So in terms of podcasts, this is going to be very unimpressive. I actually don't listen to any WordPress podcast. Now that I'm looking on my phone to see what I have. Other than I do listen. I have been listening to a few episodes of what Brian's been doing over at Post Status. And occasionally I'll listen to the Distance podcast by Basecamp, previously known as 37 Signals. The podcasts I do tend to listen to are like business minded or like consumer minded, making smart decisions just in the marketplace around things like that. I think The Office is probably just, I think the audience is probably just signed off. In terms of finding out about books, so I try to keep my finger on the pulse of what's coming out. Some of these, now all of the books that I've recommended, I've read. And I have a shelf full of other ones I would recommend. And I read them, all of those were read before having kids. Right now I'm reading a lot of things after they're asleep. And to be honest, right now I am reading the Star Wars Shattered Empire comic books. So I am not the book nerd that I might be coming off as, but I think that it's important to take a look at what's going on in the Kindle store. Take a look at what's going on in the iBook store or in iTunes, or, I mean, it's kind of weird that you buy books and movies in iTunes, but I digress. And then
we're not going to get into that.
No, we're not going to. No, thank you. And then see what other people in WordPress are reading. There's some people who are going to be reading some really interesting things. This is why Twitter is so great. This is why blogs are so great. It's because you can just ask a comment, hey, what are you reading? Sometimes you can email someone. Would you just do a blog post about what you're reading and why? Or what are 3 books you'd recommend and why? And that, in terms of how I find them, it's usually staying up to date on blogs, staying up to date on what's in the Kindle store. And it's also a matter of seeing what other people recommend. And very rarely, but sometimes, if you ever visit Product Hunt, producthunt.com, you will see people in the comments talking about, hey, how did you get an idea for this? Or what did you use to build this? They'll talk about blogs and materials and things like that. And there's also some educational apps that show up on Product Hunt every now and then. So, that's another one of the places I try to check daily.
Nice. Well, if anybody who's listened to the show doesn't walk away with at least one resource to go check out, you were multitasking and not really listening close enough, because we got a ton of them. Just a quick reminder before we go, if you want to subscribe to Office Hours FM, you can do that at officehours.fm/subscribe. And all that means is you get one email a week that's a reminder of the show, either the day before, the day of the show. I promise no pestering. I also do have transcripts available, thanks to Patty Shetler. And you can find those over at officehours.fm, along with the full archive of all past episodes. So Tom, where can people find you to either throw the eggs, burn you at the stake, troll you, or just say you're awesome?
Most of the things that you said at first, I will gladly accept. The other things I will not. I am trying to be very hardworking. I want to help other people, and I want other people to do the same. So with that said, you can find me on Twitter at Tom McFarlin. That is TOMMCFARLIN. You can find me on my website at tommcfarlin.com. I'm always back and forth about Instagram, but you can see me on there. My address is my username is tom.mcfarlin. And I guess that's it. I'm not really on all the major social networks. And, you know, I'm one of those that with Instagram, maybe I'll go private tomorrow. I don't know. I don't know. But that's where you can find me. Honestly, my primary place to reach me is Twitter and my blog. I'm there every single day. And I prefer to be reached by email. Right now, I know Slack is the hip, cool place, and I'll get emails from random channels of people saying, "Hey, are you there? Hey, are you there? Hey, are you there?" No, I'm not there. I'm in my inbox or on Twitter. So try to reach me there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the show and sharing from your wealth of wisdom. And yeah, we're going to have to talk about all the things that we didn't get into today in a separate episode.
I would love to come back. I do know that you had asked me to do an outro commercial. I don't have any cheesy music to play, but I will say in my most theatrical or radio friendly voice, I will say, hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today to Office Hours FM. This episode has been brought to you by Matt Medeiros, who doesn't care about anything, who has nothing to do with anything. And he has asked that if you have listened to this episode, please send him a random tweet of the most random picture that you can find, either on Imager, a Google search, or anything else. Thank you very much for your time. Okay, so I guess that should do it for Office Hours FM.
Well, dang, I can't even sum it up any better. And with that, we will wrap episode 83. And folks, we'll see you all next week. Bye.
Yes. Bye, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thanks for having me, Carrie.